Our next and final presentation is from Mr. Nesta Katende, who is the CEO and founder of Otic Foundation, and his presentation will be titled The Agentic AI Leap, a systems thinking approach to building autonomous capital markets in East Africa. Let's put our hands together for Mr. Nesta. Yep.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank the Capital Markets Authority and the Uganda Securities Exchange and the different partners that we have for organizing this conference. And thank you so much for inviting me to be here. My name is Nesta Katende, and I am privileged to be the founder and group CEO of Otic Group. Essentially, we are democratizing artificial intelligence across the African continent. We work with different private companies, the public sector, and the corporate sector in building agentic AI systems. But also in there, we are deep into AI education and AI democratization across the continent of Africa. We are also based in Kigali, Rwanda. This conversation is very critical and very urgent, ladies and gentlemen, and allow us to have a depth discussion. When I was humbled to be contacted to speak on this topic, I thought of a topic that could be relevant in tandem with the dispensation that we're in right now as in our human existence right now. And that is the topic of agentic AI, the agentic AI leap, a systems thinking approach to building autonomous capital markets in East Africa. Before we delve into this topic, the reason as to why I gave it this title is that even in the conversation of digital transformation, you have to be relevant in defining the conversation of digital transformation as of, what level of digital transformation are we talking about? Because the conversation of digital transformation in 1972 is definitely different from the conversation of digital transformation in 2025. The conversation of digital transformation in 1970 is different from the conversation of digital transformation in 2024. But deeper than that, we have entered into what we call an unprecedented growth of technology that now, even the conversation of digital transformation as of January 2025 is different from the conversation of digital transformation as of October 2025. And so it was important for us to have a conversation of digital transformation relevant in tandem with the times and eons that we're in right now. But more than that also, it was important for us to define the systems and structures that must support that transformation that we're in right now, and that is the systems thinking approach, whereby we are approaching digital transformation of capital markets from a holistic point of view, dealing with the whole ecosystem of financial markets, aside from handling it from a siloed approach. Siloed digitization of building products for the regulator here, building products for the investor, for the exchanger. We're looking at it from a holistic approach. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, that understanding there is what prompted me in that inflection point to come up with that relevant topic that you see there. Ladies and gentlemen, that is me. I'm humbled to be here. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I am an ardent scholar of progress. I've taken time to study how companies and organizations can be relevant, why companies and organizations or generations go past and stand and be resilient over dispensations of human existence. Why some companies fail and why other companies fail. Why some associations keep on. Why some generational, why companies are generational in terms of stability across the different tides of time. And in that inflection, ladies and gentlemen, I understood one critical point, that you cannot have a strategic direction of where you are going without understanding where you are coming from. It is important for you as an organization or as an association to be pinpoint, to be relevant, to have the language that is necessary for your dispensation, to be at the cutting edge of your time, to understand where you're coming from first, because therein lies the wisdom to give you that direction. Those of us who read the Bible, Proverbs chapter 22, verse 28, the Bible says, do not remove the ancient landmarks which your forefathers set. It means it's important to understand that the direction of your organization or your company, your association, in there, the pattern is that new wombs come from old wombs. And so in that understanding, ladies and gentlemen, there was a gentleman called Gordon Moore. Gordon Moore was a futurist, right? He was one of the co-founders of Intel. And he came up with a law called Moore's Law. And Moore's Law is the law where he said that computing power doubles after 2 years, right? And so in that understanding, he came up with the understanding that after his observation of how technology is progressing over time, computing power doubles after 2 years. There's a doubling of computing power every after a 2-year dispensational leap. That has been the tide that is driving the digital boat right now in our dispensation. But for those of us who are keen students of progress, as you can see there, 2025, 2027, and what have you, here you are having, traffic optimization, AI, machine learning, and what have you. I think all of us are familiar with that. When you go deep and understand and study the sands of time in there, you realize that the world is shifting. Okay, this is something I want to talk about as well. The major concept and driver of Moore's Law was the miniaturization of transistors. So they become bigger and smaller and smaller. There's a time where a transistor was as big as that movie screen, but they become smaller and smaller and smaller. Hence, we're getting into what we're going to talk about, autonomous IoT. But if you're an ardent scholar, ladies and gentlemen of progress, like I'm telling you right now, to fashion and understand transforming capital markets, we need to understand where you're coming from and be an ardent scholar of progress, because therein is a wisdom, ladies and gentlemen. You understand that over the past couple of years, we have moved into what we call the law of accelerated returns by a gentleman called Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil said that, the world is moving from simply a 2-year dispensational leap of computing power. It is now moving into an exponential vertical curve. That even when you talk about AI right now in 2025, he's trying to tell you, in other words, ladies and gentlemen, that the conversation of AI as of January is different from the conversation of AI as of December. It's not going to pivot and change in 2027 for you to have a wow moment. It is moving at a rapid, crazy, momentous speed. And ladies and gentlemen, as you can see there, the curve is an exponential curve, right? And so if you compare and see, for example, by 2030, we'll move into the AGI, artificial general intelligence, global connection is going to come through there. By 2066, we are going to enter into the ubiquitization of AI, or smart infrastructure, and then, of course, we shall have transhumanism and all that by 2040. The curve is moving. It's moving so fast. And so when you compare Moore's Law versus accelerated returns, ladies and gentlemen, you will see there that the curve here was a bit, it's a 2-year dispensational leap, right? And the focus was integrated circuits, transistors on chips, the driver of miniaturization. But look at where we enter 2025. We're moving into what they call singularity, the narrative and notion that at a particular point, AI is sort of going to have, a sentient kind of thing, like a consciousness where we are going. And it's driven by intelligence and knowledge. That is where we are in 2025, ladies and gentlemen, and that should be the conversation of digital transformation in capital markets. At the cutting edge, la creme de la creme of this conversation, that should be the one. So where are we right now in shaping East Africa's capital markets, ladies and gentlemen? We did the necessary phase one. We moved from paper ledgers to digital platforms, from flow trading to mobile application. That was the necessary phase one, but that is not enough, ladies and gentlemen. We must innovate for the future. At this particular moment in time, the conversation dominating digital transformation aggressively should be around AI and machine learning, sustainable finance platforms, blockchain, and decentralized finance for inclusion access. From simply moving from efficiency to evolution. And so when you understand this, you understand that we have entered a very interesting space, ladies and gentlemen, that what I call the reactive market paradox. And the reactive market paradox is that we are dealing with digital transformation, ladies and gentlemen, in siloed reactive systems. The investor reacts to price swings, the regulator reacts to compliance changes or compliance breach, and the company to quarterly pressures. That is very dangerous where we are going. It's a reactive, siloed approach. You are digitizing from a siloed approach. You build a platform for the regulator, then you build a platform for this. Where we are going, and I'm going to show you the problem, what's happening here, is that universal reactivity leads to friction, latency, and inefficiency. Essentially, I say that we are running a relay race with handcuffs on, and the consequences, ladies and gentlemen, is shallow markets, 25% liquidity, scarce liquidity, and high cost of capital. So our current reality is that we are manual, slow, and it's expensive because we're dealing with digital transformation from a siloed approach, number one. Number two, a reactive approach. Number three, from a simply a phase one approach. So I move into agentic AI. So with that understanding, now we know exactly what we're dealing with. Our minds have been recalibrated to have a critical discussion on the cutting edge. And that's agentic AI, from reactive computation to proactive strategy. How does the la creme cutting edge conversation of digital transformation in 2025 look like? And that's why I said the agentic AI leap, ladies and gentlemen. And I give an example. Maybe some of us have not interacted with agents. It's a simple example, and I'm going to relate it with what we're talking about here, as you can see in the screen. Look, for example, at a calculator, right? You type 2 + 2 is 4, and then you give it your input, and it gives you an output, right? The difference between a calculator and an agent, so let's say, for example, you are the chief investment officer. And so you have your calculator, so you put in your math, and you want it to give you feedback. However, after the calculator gives you that answer, you, the chief investment officer, you already have the strategic direction of why you want that answer, isn't it? So it gives you that answer. You say, okay, thank you for the answer. Now, I want to deduce a particular strategy from this answer. I intend that the answer that the calculator has given me is supposed to come up with A, B, C, D, informing my bigger intention of why I'm using the calculator. The agent does everything for you. The agent, ladies and gentlemen, and allow me to read something here I wrote for us here. It is, agentic AI is fundamentally different. It's proactive and goal-oriented, right? It does what you mean to do, not necessarily you giving it answers, giving it data. All right? So it is the digital embodiment of a chief investment officer. Literally, it's doing what you are requesting it to do, but more than that, it autonomously, right, through different data streams and data collection points, has an intuition to autonomously think and do far beyond a normal calculator can do. So comprehends the global context, assesses dynamic risk, devises multi-layered strategy, negotiations, and execution of complex objectives. And the difference here, ladies and gentlemen, like I told you, the earlier conversation of AI was simply your normal ChatGPT, your Gemini AI. It was mostly reactive. Many of us use ChatGPT. That's not where we are right now. Like I said, your language of AI should change. It was more of a reactive AI. Now, we are talking of a proactive AI, and that is exactly where agentic AI is. So we are pivoting from calculation to recognition. Latency reduced by 90%, capital allocation versus 2.1x. And so the agentic AI in action, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see here, that you input the data streams, the global market data, the regulatory compliance feeds, the microeconomic and geopolitical context, and the AI agent reasoning and execution engine. The output is dynamic capital allocation, optimized portfolios and risk partnerships, new investments and product innovation. So it comes up with that autonomously, right? And the impact metrics, as you can see there, reactive versus agentic AI, reduction of latency, market depth increase, proactive compliance, and what have you there. So from manual computation to autonomous strategic execution. And ladies and gentlemen, with that understanding of where we are, as I'm about to finish, that is where now we launch into the systems thinking approach. Now, we could have a conversation of 2 hours on systems thinking, and we can delve into that, but that's not for today, only because of time. But you cannot talk about that power of technology from a siloed approach. You cannot simply build AI agents from simply the regulator or simply the investor or simply to harness that full power of technology. You must think capital markets as a system, as a living, breathing, interconnected, interdependent ecosystem. And that's what we're going to talk about in these next few minutes. But the problem, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see in that slide, is that we are viewing for too long, we have viewed our capital markets through a mechanistic lens. We see the regulator differently, like I told you, exchange differently, alone, broker alone, And the problem, as you can see here, from viewing these actors of the capital markets ecosystem alone, is that you're going to create a problem because you create, you optimize and create products or digitization product with pinpoint-based problems, right? You deal with the exchange alone, like I talked about. But systems thinking combines all of them, and allow me to read something here that I wrote down for our notes. Maybe some of us are taking some notes. For too long, we have viewed our capital markets through a mechanistic lens. We see a regulator and an exchanger. We treat liquidity, volatility, and fraud as separate problems to be solved with separate point-based solutions. But systems thinking reveals a different truth. A capital market is not simply a machine. From this understanding, it's a complex adaptive system, a living, breathing ecosystem that has emergent behaviors, that has unpredictable outcomes and feedback loops. In that understanding, I hope I'm not losing anyone, but probably we shall have a Q&A after, right? And so, we optimize in isolation, like you can see there, and that leads to liquidity, volatility, and so, you have the point solutions. But then I said the mindset shift is when you're dealing with this kind of system, agentic AI requires a new perspective. So I'm looking at holistic solutions via agentic AI. What I'm trying to say is we are going to have to build agents that interconnect all these different actors, and I'm going to show you a three-phase approach on how to do that. Just a little bit about that is that it's a dynamic system. It's not a machine like I talked about. It has feedback loops. Maybe let me talk about that, a web of interconnected and interdependent actors. Probably talk about feedback loops. What I was talking about is that, for example, regulator A tightens rules in country A, and that leads to speculative capital shifts in country B, and then creates a bubble. Are you seeing that? That's what they call a feedback loop. Let's look at the emerging behaviors, collective actions, and unplanned outcomes. Collective fear from investors, it triggers a market-wide sell-off, unintended outcome. So you're looking at capital markets, ladies and gentlemen, from an ecosystem view, not an isolated view. All right? Let's look at the deep interconnectivity, the systematic and economic repercussions of ESG, company-level neglect. A company A and I invest in ESG, right? Environmental, social, and whatever they are focused on short-term cost savings. What that does, the ripple effect and sector-wide risk, increased perceived risk for entire sector, and that leads to a systematic economic repercussions, as you can see there. So conclusion, interconnectedness turns individual choices into a collective financial destiny. So the problem, like I said, digitization, fast parts, unhealthy whole. The current approach, isolated optimization, like I talked about. Digital components are optimized individually. The flow, a fragmented system health. So what we have right now are faster parts, but no improvement in health, stability, or growth of the entire system. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to finish this, that if we are looking at the different types of agents we can build because of time, number one, we're looking, for example, at the liquidity agent, a symbiotic organism of market health. Now, I think I'll probably share this PowerPoint. I already shared it with CMA for some of us to delve deep and understand this because of time. But the liquidity agent, the systematic order here, liquidity scares away large-scale investment. It stifles company growth and makes our economies fragile. But the solution here is a network of cross-border liquidity agents proactively identify and heals liquidity gaps, leading to systematic liquidity resilience of the whole ecosystem, right? Very fast, we have the ESG validator agent. We are in the feedback loop of trust, lack of trusted ESG data, but what are we looking at? What are we looking at here? With this agent, fundamentally alters incentives, steer a system towards long-term sustainability. We have the regulator sentinel as well that we can talk about. I'm talking about here that, that reactive regulation treats symptoms and addresses vulnerability. Pandemic after millions are infected. Can we build an agent that detects pathogens early, protects cells without shutting down the whole system? So, this is my phase of approaching. This is not rocket science, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm very privileged that our organization actually builds these AI agents for different corporate organizations on the continent. This is not rocket science. Ladies and gentlemen, this can be done. Number one, 6 to 12 months. One, action. Form the East African Agentic AI Alliance. Quickly, very fast. Can we have the ethical AI framework? Task force of regulators, market infrastructure, and tech innovation incubators. Number two, this is very critical, ladies and gentlemen, from a data point of view. Mandate machine readable. We need to have readable data across standardized machine readable formats. Phase two, 8 to 12, 24 months, launch pilot agents. You know, can we create a regulatory sandbox around that? Someone talked about it here in that regard. And also upskill our training people, the AI quotient training programs. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to upskill our people to understand these conversations right now. Banks, brokerages, and hybrid workforce, regulatory bodies, we do corporate AI skillings as well, and we actually build AI agents. These are very simple things to do. And lastly, practical first approach. Here we talk about scale and integration, successful pilots, you know, and evolve the regulation framework. So ladies and gentlemen, we need to change our conversation. That if the coordinate of Africa, if East Africa should stand and be relevant and pivot this conversation of digital transformation, then I think we have to get our hands dirty and actually begin to build these systems right now with what we have. And that is why I was able to have this conversation. The leap is before us. Let us take it together. Our choice is simple. East Africa's united future, intelligent, autonomous, and sustainable systems. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to me. These are conversations that are critical in our boardroom discussions, but more than that, a phased approach and practical implementation is necessary for us to drive the next edge, the next cutting conversation of digital transformation, not only from isolated optimization and building of products for different actors in the system, but looking at it from an ecosystem point of view, working together for all of us in East Africa, and see that we change the conversation. Thank you so much for listening to me, and thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you.